After the death of Emperor Constantine in the year 337, the significance of the new Rome, i.e. Constantinople, continued to grow. However, the rise of the city occurred gradually. Until the ascension of the first Theodosius in the year 379, emperors had only resided in Constantinople for a total of 9 years. Nevertheless, starting from the era of Emperor Theodosius I, the city began to be used as a permanent capital. Similar to the period of Constantine, the political center of the Roman Empire once again converged in Constantinople. It not only became the political center but also emerged as one of the most important cities of the empire in terms of culture and economy. In the previous section, we discussed how Emperor Constantine implemented various policies to increase the city's population. During the time of Theodosius, approximately 50 to 60 years after Constantine's death, it is believed that the city's population reached around 100,000. By the end of the 6th century, this number would exceed 200,000, and in the 9th century it would reach around 1 million. Thus, Constantinople was rapidly advancing to become not only one of the most important cities of its time, but also one of the most populous cities. So, how did Constantinople appear throughout all these years? What kind of life were people leading? If we were to stroll through its streets, explore its squares, and breathe in the city's atmosphere, what kind of scene would we encounter? To answer these questions, let's try to understand through a few symbolic structures. Our first stop is the Hippodrome, a structure that was virtually the center of social life in Constantinople, where chariot races and theater performances were held. Modeled after the Circus Maximus of the Roman era and reconstructed during the time of Emperor Constantine, the Hippodrome's capacity was expanded to 80,000 people. The central wall, adorned with artworks called the spina, was placed in the middle of the racing track, around which chariots would race. The special sections at the bottom of the seating area were reserved for senators and statesmen. However, the chariot races held in the Hippodrome became a meeting point for several groups throughout Byzantine history where political, social, and cultural rivalries unfolded. Teams like the Blues, Greens, Reds, and Whites, representing political parties, often had competitors racing for them. These teams were also political factions representing the people. The emperor would openly support one of these parties. Over time, the Blues and Greens gained prominence, while the Reds and Whites faded from the historical stage. The Blues would sit to the right of the senatorial box at the lower tier, and the Greens would sit to the left. However, the Hippodrome was not just a venue for such spectacles. It held great importance in Byzantine political history. This was because, over time, it became a place for official ceremonies and political debates. When a new emperor ascended to the throne, the public would gather in the Hippodrome to express their approval. Simultaneously, people would gather here to criticize and voice their complaints about the emperor's policies. Therefore, throughout Byzantine history, the Hippodrome witnessed numerous demonstrations and uprisings that shook the throne. Another center of social life was the markets established in various regions of the city. People would gather in markets and squares to engage in trade and hear daily news. In the 5th century, one of the busiest areas in the capital was Augustion Square, located where present-day Hagia Sophia Square stands. So, our second stop is Augusta, the heart of social and political life in Byzantine Constantinople. This was also the center of commercial activities. In addition to the market in the square, there were businesses like jewelry shops in the market between the Great Palace and the Constantinos Barracks. Furthermore, throughout the region, one could come across street vendors selling valuable fabrics, shoes, or simple everyday items. Caution was needed while navigating this square, as encountering a statesman or a palace member at any moment was quite common. Nobles often rode white horses and strolled with a retinue, with their attendants using long staffs to clear the way for them in the crowd. Noble women either traveled in a carriage or on a sedan, accompanied by eunuchs from the harem. Now, let's move on to another iconic structure of Constantinople. Constantinople was the new capital of the Roman Empire, and the empire gradually converted to Christianity starting with Constantine. This religious transformation process was completed during the reign of Emperor Theodosius I, and by the year 380, Christianity was declared the official religion of the empire. Since Constantinople was the capital of the empire, one of the most magnificent churches had to be located here. This church was built near Augustion Square during the reign of Constantine's son, Constantius II. Known as the Magna Ecclesia in Latin, meaning Great Church, it was officially opened on February 15, 360. However, its maker's lifespan would not be very long-lasting. It was burned during the uprisings in the year 404, during the reign of Emperor Arcadius, and completely destroyed. About 10 years later, in the same location, a new basilica was built by Arcadius's son, Theodosius II. This one was as enchanting and majestic as Magna Ecclesia. The people of Constantinople worshipped in this church for over a century. Now, on January 15, 532, we need to go to the Hippodrome. We are facing an immense crowd. All seats are filled to capacity, senators, blues, greens. The sun is setting, and the 22nd race of the day begins. However, this race is not really on anyone's mind. There is a deafening roar in the Hippodrome, and suddenly, this roar echoes with a single-word slogan, Nika, Nika, meaning victory, victory, victory. Those chanting this slogan are not just one group. Both rival factions, the Blues and the Greens, shout this slogan in unison. This is the Nika Riot, one of the most striking scenes in Byzantine history. Soon, this angry crowd will spill out of the Hippodrome and turn the historic peninsula upside down, leaving Constantinople in flames. Emperor Justinian, anxious and panicked in his palace, faces the toughest test of his reign this night. He contemplates leaving Constantinople, but his wife Theodora persuades him otherwise, and with the help of his capable general Narses, the emperor manages to suppress the riot. The Nika Riot indeed constitutes one of the most crucial chapters in Byzantine history. It is also notable for revealing how precarious the ground of Byzantine politics was. The cause of the Nika Riot was the negative impact of Justinian's policies on both the Greens and the Blues. As a result, the riot was quelled, but along with many structures around the palace, the church built during the reign of Theodosius II was reduced to ruins. Justinian, aiming to erase the effects of the riot, began rebuilding a large part of the city. The structure he was most interested in was the new church to be erected in place of the old basilica. The emperor wanted to build a completely different, larger, and more impressive church than its predecessors. The physicist Anthemius was appointed for this task. Producing the materials for construction would be a laborious and time-consuming process. Instead, utilizing carved ready-made materials from structures and temples in many regions of the empire would significantly expedite the construction. Thus, materials from various regions of the empire began to be brought for the construction of the building. For example, the columns were largely brought from the Temple of Artemis in Ephesus, the Temple of the Sun in Egypt, and the Temple of Baalbek in Lebanon. Additionally, transporting the colored stones used in cladding and columns to the capital was much easier. According to the historian Procopius, over 10,000 workers were employed in the construction. The construction, which began on December 23, 532, was completed on December 27, 537. Hagia Sophia, one of the iconic structures of Constantinople, emerged by being demolished and rebuilt in this way. By the 600s, with structures such as the Constantinople Hippodrome, the Great Palace, and the Hagia Sophia Church, the city had become one of the most beautiful and significant cities in the world. This situation strengthened the city politically and commercially day by day. However, this position of the city began to attract the attention of other states. Among them were the Avars and the Sasanian Empire. The armies of the two states united and besieged the city in 626. However, this attempt ended in failure thanks to the city's robust walls and the empire's navy. Constantinople had survived a serious siege, but it was just one of many sieges in its history. From the 7th century onwards, with the emergence and expansion of the Islamic State, the Eastern Roman Empire suffered significant territorial losses in North Africa and the Middle East. Now, the eyes of the Arabs were on the capital of the empire. In the reign of Constantine IV, the residents of Constantinople saw the armies of the Umayyad Caliph Muawiyah in front of their walls. The siege began in 674 with the forces brought by an enormous fleet that surrounded the city by land and sea. However, the city escaped from this siege as the attacks from land failed to breach the walls, and Muslim ships burned even upon contact with the fire-resistant stone of the city. While the empire was in turmoil with palace revolts and anarchy between 711 and 717, Constantinople was repeatedly devastated by earthquakes and fires. Taking advantage of the empire's difficult situation, the Umayyads once again besieged Constantinople. The capital besieged by Meslim, the brother of Caliph Sulayman ibn Abd al-Malik, managed to survive this danger, especially thanks to the Greek fire and the resilience of the city walls, through the efforts of Emperor Leo III, who ascended the throne in 717. However, the greatest danger for the city would arise in 726. The iconoclastic movement, which began with an oath by Leo III, aimed to break the power and influence of the monks who had essentially turned the culture of icons into a profession. The street fights that began with Leo removing the depiction of Jesus above the palace gate turned Istanbul into a bloodbath, and the iconoclastic movement led to rebellions in many parts of the empire. This movement would occupy Byzantine politics for many years. Nevertheless, Constantinople constantly faced various dangers. In 860, this time, Russians attacked the city walls from the north. Russian attacks instilled fear in the city residents, but due to a sudden storm erupting in the strait, Russian ships were shattered, and Constantinople escaped this siege as well. By the 11th century, in the reign of Basil II, the capital had a tremendous commercial impact and its population approached 1.5 million. Trade routes reaching the city extended thousands of kilometers. However, it was mentioned earlier that there was a price to pay for this advancement. Numerous continuous sieges had caused serious damage to the city, some of which were overcome lightly. Nevertheless, the city somehow managed to stand and remained unconquered by any state. However, when a Crusader fleet arrived from Italy in 1202, the situation changed. The Crusaders planned to breach the walls of Constantinople and establish their own rule in the city.